At a dinner for Nobel Prize winners, President John F. Kennedy said, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge, that has ever been gathered at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." In so many ways, Thomas Jefferson has been lauded as a great creator, as a statesman, as an author in agriculture, as an architect. And did you know he was also a furniture designer? For example, Thomas Jefferson took a traditional Windsor chair made of wood and added a swivel to the seat, thereby creating the first well-known swivel chair. And he didn't stop there. Later, he added a writing surface to his swivel Windsor chair, and supposedly it was used for some of his work on the Declaration of Independence. And he designed other types of chairs too. He commissioned at least 3 hammock chairs made with an unusual sloping back that allowed him to use what he called the medium position between sitting and lying down. Jefferson certainly seemed to be a good ideator, creating in so many diverse areas. In this lecture, we continue to learn tools for ideating so that you can think like Thomas Jefferson. Let's review what we already know. We've learned and practiced brainstorming, 2 versions of brainstorming: classic brainstorming with a facilitator capturing the ideas, and post-it brainstorming, where the participants write on post-its and hand them to the facilitator so that they can be displayed publicly. We learned and practiced brainwriting, which is a silent form of idea generation, where participants write their ideas quietly and then swap sheets with one another so that they can read and build off of each other's ideas. We've also learned reverse brainstorming, which is taking the challenge statement and putting it into a negative form, generating ideas on that and then reversing them back into positive solutions for the original challenge. We learned forced connections, which is designed to allow us to build off of and use objects as springboards for our ideation. We've learned visually identifying relationships, which uses photographs. We take a break, a mental excursion. We look at photographs to create free associations, and then we take those free associations and we facilitate associations connected back to our original challenge. We learned a number of tools that help us to borrow ideas from other places, from synectics, direct analogy, personal analogy. And then finally, we learned to borrow ideas from nature, called biomimicry. Now, different tools do different things. They appeal to different people, and they generate different kinds of ideas. Stan Griskevich did a research study where he took 3 ideation tools. He gave them to managers, and he had them all work on the same challenge. The challenge they worked on was other uses for tea bags. He had the managers generate ideas using brainwriting, brainstorming, and visually identifying relationships, 3 tools that are familiar to you. Then he evaluated the kinds of ideas produced by these 3 tools. He used Curtin's Adapter Innovator Scale. If you recall, in the scale, creativity ranges from an adaptive style of creativity, which is looking to make improvements, staying within the box, incremental changes, more evolutionary creative thinking, versus at the other end of the continuum, we have more innovatively creative ideas. These are more radical ideas. They're more revolutionary. They're out of the box. What he noticed when he took the ideas generated by these 3 tools is that they tended to generate different kinds of ideas. The brainwriting tool tended to generate more adaptive ideas, ideas that kept the tea bag essentially as it was. For example, instead of tea, put coffee in the tea bag. The visually identifying relationships tool generated a completely different kind of idea. The VIR tool tended to generate more innovative answers, answers that threatened the existing paradigm or changed the existing paradigm. For example, manager said, take the tea bags and make them into parachutes. The third tool, brainstorming, tended to generate a mix of both adaptive and innovative ideas. What are the implications of this research study? Well, one clear implication is that you can choose a tool to help you to get to the kinds of ideas you desire, the kinds of ideas that you want. Brainstorming helps to generate both kinds of ideas. Brainwriting more adaptive. You want more innovative responses, use a tool like visually identifying relationships. Or use some of the other tools that you've learned, such as force connection, direct analogy, personal analogy, and biomimicry. They tend to generate more innovative ideas as well. Tools like attribute listing, morphological matrix, and Scamper, tools that you'll learn in this lecture, are more systematic, are more structured, and will tend to generate more adaptive solutions. So a number of years ago, I was in Paris and I visited the Louvre, and I came across Da Vinci's journals. The journal was opened up to a page with multiple sketches of the same face, and each sketch had a slight alteration to it. In one image, the figure had a longer nose. In the next image, smaller ears, different hair in the next image, a change to the mouth, and so on. Attribute listing, the first tool we'll learn in this lecture, is a systematic tool designed to make variations, much like I saw in Da Vinci's journal. It was conceived by Robert Crawford at the University of Nebraska, who may have taught the very first university course on creativity in the US in 1931. He saw creativity as taking steps to modify the present conditions. In attribute listing, there are a number of steps. The first step is to list the attributes, the components of the challenge. You break it down into elements. And then in the second step, you generate ideas to improve each element, to improve each attribute. And then you select the best ideas. Let's try this tool out. Let's say we wish to improve a chair. Perhaps this is how Thomas Jefferson came up with his chair designs. So let's think like Thomas Jefferson then. In step one, we list the attributes of the chair. We have the seat, the arms, backrest, and legs. In step two, we now generate ideas to improve each attribute. And because we're ideating, we're in the beginning phase of the ideate step, we recall that we're applying the divergent thinking mindset here. So we're suspending our valuation. We're striving for quantity. We're making connections, and we're seeking novelty. So let's take each attribute, and let's look at some sample ideas that we might generate for each attribute. Let's take the seat first. Perhaps we could use a cushion. We could change the fabric. We could add a trampoline to it. We could make it out of mesh. We can make it Tempur-Pedic. We could add springs to it. We can make the cushion out of water. We can make it round to encourage balance. The arms, perhaps we can make the arms collapsible or hideaway, adjustable or removable, replaced from different kinds of events, and we could perhaps add a cup holder. Let's go to the backrest. We could build in a lower backrest. We can add an attachment for lower back support. Make an inflatable lower back support. We can add a headrest to it. We can create an adjustable headrest, a headrest that holds your head like when you're on an airplane. And then finally, let's think about the legs. Perhaps we could have 4 different legs from 4 different design periods. Maybe we can put springs in the legs to allow for movement. Make the legs look like human legs. We could have do-it-yourself chairs where you order legs and other components to create your own chair. At the end, when you've generated within each of these attributes, now that we've done the divergent phase, you know what follows, the convergent phase. So you go into each of these attributes and you select the ideas that may be most effective or most desirable in terms of modifying the chair. Well, perhaps attribute listing is alive and well in chair design. There are many different kinds of chairs out there, and here are 3 examples I'll describe to you. They all use the human body sort of as a springboard for their design. In one example, we have a chair where the arms are, in fact, human arms. They're designed to look like human arms. In another example, we have a chair that's designed like a head, where the face we sit in and it looks out from behind us. And in the third example, we have the entire human body in a chair position so that you can sit on someone's lap. These are examples of how chairs have been modified, how the attributes of the chairs have been modified. Attribute listing can be used on any challenge, not just tangible things like the chair that I just took us through. It can be used on any challenge that has attributes or components. When those are identifiable, you can use attribute listing. Here's another example. Let's look into an organization. And let's say our challenge is to reduce employee turnover. So in step 1, we list the attributes associated with employee turnover. Let's say we've identified 3: the physical work conditions, the psychological work conditions, and employee engagement. Now, you may recall in step 2, we now take each of those attributes and we generate ideas to see if we can improve each attribute. So let's start with physical work conditions. What ideas might we have for improving physical work conditions? We can make the space cleaner, brighter. We can add healthcare. We can have an on-premise coffee shop. We can have childcare facilities, personalized office space. We can remove corporate-wide policies and replace them with unit policies. In terms of the psychological work conditions, we could have weekly raffles. We could have counseling services available. We can enhance the leadership skills of the management team to improve the psychological work conditions. And finally, with employee engagement, what ideas might we have to improve employee engagement? Well, one possibility is job rotation. We could have shadow days where you follow different people around and find out what their job responsibilities are. We could bring your guest to work day, have opportunities to expand responsibilities. We could celebrate employees' anniversaries. We can begin Employee of the Month recognition program. We can make senior leadership more visible, have executive leaders hand-deliver birthday cards, and etc. At the end, as before, with the chair, we go into each of these components and we choose the ideas that we think will work best, the ideas that will help to address our challenge, the ones that will be the most viable solutions. Let's take another area, a more personal example now. Let's say we want to improve a relationship with a significant other. We begin again, as with the chair and employee turnover, by listing the attributes associated with improving a relationship, a personal relationships. So communication might be an attribute we would look at. Shared social activities, shared domestic activities, finances, and then a broad category, fun. Ways to have more fun. In step 2, we generate ideas to improve each attribute. Again, we're engaging in divergent thinking. We'll begin in this example with communication. What might be some ideas? Well, we could have an electronic shared journal. We could telegraph our daily mood to each other. We could go on a couples weekend. We could have a compliments board in the kitchen, and so forth. In terms of shared social activities, we could join a health club. We could do yoga together. We could start a couples group. We could take a cooking class together. In terms of shared domestic activities, we could rotate chores. We could delegate chores. We could chart our domestic duties. With finances, we could work with a financial planner. We could sort our funds into 3 categories, ours, mine, and yours. We can create our own board game based on Monopoly. We can set financial goals. Finally, in the fun category, perhaps we could create a garden together, relive our honeymoon, write a joint memoir, create a picture book of our life together, create a bucket list, and pursue these items together. And when you're done with the divergent thinking phase, you move through, in this case, probably with your partner, and converge on those ideas and those categories that you think will be most effective. So, attribute listing. It's a systematic idea generation tool. In a way like the earlier tools we learned that provide springboards, the components become your springboard. They isolate specific areas to generate ideas. So there's a clear structure to the tool. Maybe one of America's great inventors used this method of thinking. Thomas Edison's biography says he had 40,000 pages of notes on finding the right filament to withstand the 40-hour laboratory test for the light bulb. His assistants tested over 1,600 different materials. They swapped one material in for the next until they struck upon the one that worked. They examined such material as coconut fiber, fishing line, and a hair from a friend's beard. Finally, they hit on carbonized bamboo. Much like attribute listing, they swapped one item in for the next for that component of the filament. Attribute listing works on one dimension at a time. The next tool we'll practice works across dimensions. It cross-fertilizes ideas. A number of years ago, I was visiting Western Massachusetts, and I visited the Norman Rockwell Museum there. They had an interesting display that gave some insight into his creative process. In this display, they had the final canvas that he created, and next to it was another canvas. And on that canvas, they had small images that had variations in the scene that eventually led to the final canvas. In each scene, he changed some aspect of it. He changed the girl, and perhaps from a blonde, he put in a brunette. He changed the figures in the scene and their positions. He changed the background in the scene. And so this canvas had a variety of these scenes. And he combined what he liked best for the final canvas. In a way, this is similar to a tool called Morphological Matrix, a deliberate creativity tool. Morphological Matrix is an idea generation tool that extends attribute listing. We generate ideas for an attribute along one axis of the matrix, then ideas for a second attribute along a second axis. And then we can combine these ideas to create new outcomes. Here's a very simple example. Let's say we wish to make a new kind of sandwich. The two dimensions, the two axes, will be the kinds of spread, and the other axis will be meats. So for spreads, we can place those along the top of our matrix. We might say mayo. We create a column for mayo. Guacamole, another column for guacamole. Peanut butter and brown mustard. For meats, we list those in the very first column: turkey, chicken, roast beef, and ostrich. Now with this matrix, we can cross these two dimensions and create interesting combinations. So, for example, we might cross turkey with mayo, or turkey with guacamole, or turkey with peanut butter. We might cross chicken with mayo, or chicken with guacamole. We could cross roast beef with peanut butter, or roast beef with brown mustard. We could take ostrich, and we can combine that with mayo, peanut butter, or brown mustard. In this way, we're taking our two dimensions and we're crossing every possible combination. Gary Davis, in his book Creativity is Forever, indicates that Fran Stryker used Morphological Matrix to produce storylines for radio and comics. Fran Stryker was born in Buffalo. He graduated from Lafayette High School, and he attended the University of Buffalo. He was a co-creator of the Lone Ranger, as well as the Green Hornet and Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Radio needed content desperately at that time. You see, once it was invented, the radio spread faster than the internet today. With the Lone Ranger, Stryker wrote more than 150 scripts a year. The radio series ran for 21 years, from 1933 to 1954, with a total of almost 3,000 original episodes. How on earth could you sustain your creativity? According to Davis, Stryker used a systematic process like Morphological Matrix. He had 4 dimensions listing ideas that were combined into stories for the Lone Ranger. Let's look at an example. Along the top, we might list 4 elements that we would find in a story, such as a dilemma, new characters, a place, and a villain. And then underneath each one of these, we can list ideas. So under dilemma, we could say the well runs dry, the mine collapses, the wagon train is caught in a storm, there's disease. Under new characters, we could have zombies, an orphan boy raised by wolves, Abraham Lincoln, and traveling circus. Under place, we could have mountain, desert, a ghost town, the U.S.-Mexico border. Under villain, Billy the Kid, escaped convict, a rabid dog, or a hungry mountain lion. Now we can go across each of these columns and we can randomly combine these elements to create a story. So randomly combining these, let's look at one example. A wagon train that's caught in a storm with zombies as the characters. The place could be a ghost town and the villain could be an escaped convict. Let's look at another random combination. As far as a dilemma, it could be a mine collapse. The characters could include a traveling circus. The location could be the US-Mexico border. And finally, the villain could be a rabid dog. So what are some of the benefits of morphological matrix? Well, it's flexible. It can be used on any challenge with multiple dimensions. I've used it with students to have them write and perform skits, like our Lone Ranger example. This tool generates many combinations. A matrix with 4 dimensions and 10 ideas listed in each dimension yields 10,000 possible combinations. Earlier, we learned Osborne created brainstorming. He also created idea-spurring questions to enhance these sessions. He would ask questions when people would run out of ideas. He would ask questions like, what can we add? What can we take away? What can we modify? He used these as idea-spurring questions. In fact, he had 70 idea-spurring questions. Bob Everly came along later and he organized these questions into a mnemonic that made it easier to remember these questions. The mnemonic he used was SCAMPER. SCAMPER stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, which could also be magnify or minify, put to other uses, eliminate, and rearrange. Let's go through each of these and look at the kinds of questions that can be used to spur further ideas. So with substitute, who else instead? What else instead? Are there other ingredients, other material, other processes? In combine, how about a blend? What can we bring together? Can we combine purposes? Can we combine units? Can we combine appeals? For adapt, what else is like this? What can you adapt for use as a solution? What does the past offer as a parallel? What could I copy? Modify. Can you change the item in some way? Its meaning, color, motion, sound, smell, or shape. Now, M also stands for magnify and minify. What can you add? Can you have greater frequency of something? Stronger, larger, thicker, duplicate? Minify. What might be subtracted? What could we make smaller, lighter, or how might we streamline it? P stands for put to other uses. What might be a different use or other uses if we modified this item? Then we come to E, which stands for eliminate. What can you eliminate, remove, eliminate waste, reduce effort? Can you cut costs? And finally, R is for rearrange. Can we interchange components? Is there another pattern, another layout? Can we transpose cause and effect? This is useful on any challenge. The questions are generic enough that it can be flexibly applied, from concrete challenges such as graphic design and interior design or improving machine, to intangible things such as improving a surface, improving a service, a process, writing a story, or making new music. Let's take this last one as an example. I believe Scamper, perhaps not deliberately, but this kind of creative thinking has been widely used in the music industry. Let's take some examples from music and relate to each of our questions in the Scamper tool. Weird Al Yankovic, American singer, songwriter, has made a career out of writing musical parodies that comment on popular culture. I think this is a kind of way of substituting. As of 2007, he had sold in excess of 12 million albums, and he's earned 3 Grammy Awards. Here's an example. He used the melody from American Pie to create a song, The Saga Begins, which is a parody on Star Wars. Let's look at C, which stands for combine. Considered to be one of the greatest stadium rock bands in history, Queen began in 1971 and played through the 1980s. Bohemian Rhapsody, one of their biggest hits, combined opera and hard rock. The song stayed at #1 in the UK for 9 weeks. Let's look at A, which stands for adapt. Colleen Ann Fitzpatrick, known by her stage name, Vitamin C, provides a good example of adapt. Her hit, Graduation, Friends Forever, adapts a popular classical piece of music, Pachelbel's Canon, into a hip-hop song style. Modify. Jazz legend Dave Brubeck heard an unusual time signature while listening to street performers in Turkey. He modified the traditional 4/4 beat in jazz to the more exotic style he experienced overseas. The result is his well-known album, Take 5. Let's look at modify. Let's specifically look at magnify. The great composer, Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring, provides a good example of magnification within a single piece of music. In this piece, the basic melody, borrowed from a folk song, Simple Gifts, grows from a more upbeat lilting tempo and light orchestration to a more majestic tempo with heavier instrumentation. Let's look at minify. Overtures provide an excellent example of the use of minify. In an overture, the composer cobbles together short pieces drawn from the overall performance. How about put to other uses? A few years ago, I went to the musical Mamma Mia. Who would have thought that these old 1970 and 1980s ABBA hits could be strung together into an interesting story? By the way, when Mamma Mia was turned into a movie in 2008, it was the top-grossing motion picture in England for the year. Perhaps it shouldn't be a surprise, ABBA has sold more than 370 million albums. Eliminate. Appalachian Spring, which I mentioned earlier, was originally written for the ballet. Copland partnered with famous choreographer Martha Graham. When it was performed, the ballet was removed, as well as about 10 minutes of the music, which created the well-known orchestral suite. How about rearrange? Rearrange. This very term is used widely in the music industry. Glee, a TV show featuring a high school glee club, performed mostly rearrangements of past songs, and many times they mashed up 2 pieces of music into a new combination. Some critics suggest that some of these rearrangements were even better than the originals. So, Scamper. We showed Scamper as it applied to music, but like all ideation tools, it can be applied on a range of challenges, from more tangible to more intangible issues. And it's still very useful as a brainstorming enhancing tool to spur further thoughts. You can use Scamper to enhance the idea generation in a brainstorming session when people begin to run out of ideas. The 3 tools, attribute listing, morphological matrix, and Scamper, are systematic. I'd like you to try them out, and perhaps you could begin with Scamper. Let's make idea generation an everyday skill. So, find a room in your home. Use Scamper to look around. What might you substitute, combine, adapt, minify, and so forth? Remember, when you're doing this, think in divergent ways. After you make a long list of possibilities, then converge. Select the ideas that you think are best and see if you can implement them. Then take one of the other systematic idea generation tools and apply them to a personal or professional challenge. Try attribute listing or morphological matrix. And this is the last lecture on the ideate step. You have many tools now in your toolkit. And you know how you can choose those tools based on the kind of ideas that you might want to generate. If you want more adaptive ideas, you now know the kinds of tools to use. Or if you want more innovative ideas, you know the kinds of tools that you can use to purposely generate those kinds of ideas. It's important to note that any ideation tool can be done in a group. And if you are using these in a group, remember the roles. It's best to have a facilitator, someone who's going to facilitate and guide the process and hold the group accountable to sticking to the divergent thinking rules. We'll have a client. This is the problem owner, the person who ultimately makes the decisions. Be sure that the client is truly open to novelty. One of the ways to undermine idea generation is to have a client who's judgmental. And to enhance the divergent thinking, have a resource group, if possible. individuals who bring ideation and divergent thinking and energy to the group. Sometimes the resource group members and the clients can be the same, where you work with an entire group who's responsible for making the decisions. In such cases, it's particularly useful to have a facilitator that ensures that the group adheres to the guidelines, and especially the divergent thinking guideline of deferring judgment. In Ideate, we've really pushed on divergent thinking. And when we look at our work with groups, in general, we find that when they're using ideation tools, they can generate 5 to 10 ideas per minute. Use this as your benchmark. Can you generate 5 to 10 ideas per minute when using these tools, individually or when working with groups? In our next lecture, we look at how to take our good ideas and turn them into great solutions. See you next time.